Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder. And today we are going to talk about the politics of the Gilded Age and how they were without any sort of restriction and sort of led themselves to corruption and scandal. So your learning targets are to talk about the weak leadership of the presidents that follow Lincoln, and we'll talk about civil service reform to try to eliminate some of this corruption, and we'll talk about economic issues in the late 1800s. So let's get started. So power is very divided during this time between Democrats and Republicans. Only twice in 20 years after Reconstruction did either party gain control of the White House and both houses of Congress at once. So that means the president would be a Democrat, say, the House would have a majority of Democrats, and the Senate would have a majority of Democrats. That is what we call a unified government. And that is it makes it easier to pass legislation. If you have a president that is Democrat and, say, a Congress that is Republican, it makes it a lot harder to work with one another, and you have a lot of gridlock. President Grant, who was elected because of his heroism in the Civil War, his leadership was marred by scandal and corruption. Not necessarily him himself, but his cabinet members. High offices he gave to untrustworthy friends, and they abused their positions to line their own pockets. Local scandals with Democrats and Republicans happen as well. And William Boss Tweed runs a very famous ring in New York. He's a New York state senator. He uses city officials to steal millions from the New York City Treasury, and all the right people are getting paid money, so nobody can really do anything about it either. Grant and the other Gilded Age presidents are very weak in leadership. That's the word to remember. They are weak. Hayes Garfield is assassinated over the corrupt spoils system, or giving a job to somebody who is a loyal party supporter regardless of their qualifications. Benjamin Harrison is the only president from Indiana, and he is in the late 1880s, and he is a weak leader as well. Hayes, he owes his own election to the Compromise of 1877. In 1876, the election, he didn't have enough votes, and so Chester Arthur is upset, or he upsets Republicans after Garfield's assassination. He doesn't win the nomination for the next election. Harrison loses the popular vote but wins the electoral vote, and that's rare in U.S. history. It can happen. But just a little bit about Harrison. There's not really a need to write this down for the test or anything, but it is a standard in Indiana U.S. history to teach about Benjamin Harrison. So he's from Indiana. He is president from 1889 to 1893, I believe. He is known for the extremely high McKinley tariff, the protective tariff. He's known for the Sherman Antitrust Act, too. He modernizes the Navy, which we'll talk about next topic when we talk about imperialism during this time. He also unsuccessfully proposes federal education funding. Education at this time is a state matter, and the federal government stays out of it. And he also wants to enforce black voting rights, but also unsuccessfully. All in all, he's not remembered as a very good president, and he's usually ranked in the bottom half of the presidents as being a weak leader. So let's move on. The one exception is Grover Cleveland. And he's only one of two Democrats during the era to be elected from 1867 to 1933, when Republicans were all the rage after the Civil War. He's the only president in history to serve two non-consecutive terms, so he is our 22nd and 24th president. And again, Benjamin Harrison's in between there. He's the only president of the era who actively fought political corruption, patronage, whichever one, giving jobs to supporters of you and not qualified employees, and political machines. He unsuccessfully had to deal with the Panic of 1893. He opposes high tariffs and free silver, and he intervenes in the Pullman strike, which also angers labor unions and Illinois Democrats, but he's the exception of the era. He's a good leader, Grover Cleveland. Gilded Age politics are marred by corrupt political parties and the spoils system. And the spoils system is using government jobs and awarding those to loyal supporters regardless of their qualifications. And a lot of political machines use these on the local level, and they're political groups that are run by bosses. And these bosses control cities for decades through agreements and backroom deals, corrupt bargains that promote the members' financial and social interests. So basically, keeping the right people in control and paying off the right people to keep those people in control. Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed in New York City are the most famous. They promise solutions to the city's problems to get immigrants to vote for them, but then they don't really deliver on them. And they use the spoil system to maintain the power and opportunities for corruption. Political cartoons of the era are a way for artists to basically commentate on the social ills of the era. Mark Twain, Thomas Nast, and Joseph Kepler are cartoonists of the era. Joseph Kepler's drawing on the right here is a cartoon of the monopolies, who are large, represented by large men in the background, overlooking the Senate, and they are in charge. A lot of the spoils system was used to award jobs in civil service, and civil service are the federal jobs. So we're talking about the national government here, in the executive branch of the government. And so if we reform this system, it would mean workers would receive these jobs based on qualifications and not on party affiliations. In 1881, President Garfield is assassinated because the shooter felt that he was cheated out of a job. And he was promised a job, and it was never given to him. So Chester Arthur, the vice president, who then becomes president, passes the Pendleton Civil Service Act in response. And the Pendleton Civil Service Act establishes the Civil Service Commission, which writes a civil service exam. And now jobs are dependent on exam scores and how you do on this test. Even today, you can go online and find different states' civil service exams. You can find the national one. It's ways to study for it. So it might be an option in your future to take the civil service test. Finally, we get to economic policy in the 1800s. Starting after, or I guess during Reconstruction, we have the Panic of 1873, which takes a lot of the focus off of Reconstruction. The bank failures and job losses that stem from this panic, they last throughout the rest of the Gilded Age, at least through the 1870s. And this makes economic issues very important to the government. There's basically two types of issues here. We have the tariff issue and the monetary policy issue. So the tariff issue means that should we have protective tariffs on goods to make people more likely to buy American goods? The Republican Party favors a high tariff to promote American industries and jobs. The Democrats favor a low tariff, and they think that a high tariff would increase the cost of goods to the point where it makes them unaffordable, and it also makes it harder for Americans to sell their goods abroad. And then the other, so you need to know which party favors which policy there. So Republicans want it high, Democrats want it low. The gold standard is a type of the monetary policy we're talking about here. So paper money under the gold standard is backed by gold reserves. You would be able to take a dollar bill into the bank and get a certain weight in gold back for it. Now, that's no longer the case because starting in the 1970s, yes, that's 1970s, not 1870s. 1970s, we start using fiat money, and this was also used during the Civil War but it's currency that's not backed by gold or silver. It's only a value it has is because we say it has value. You cannot take a dollar into the bank and get anything, any type of metal for it anymore. But this gold standard, Republicans favor only gold, whereas Democrats, who represent farmers, want a bimetallic standard. Bi meaning two metals. They want to use gold and silver for a variety of reasons. The debate over whether to use gold or gold and silver to back paper money starts in the 1870s. Congress passes the Coinage Act of 1873, which means that the U.S. only uses gold to back the paper money. This money means the money supply would be smaller, and each dollar would be worth more, and it would also keep inflation down and make our money worth more overseas. However, we forget about the farmers who want to create inflation and drive up prices for the crops that they're selling. And so they want a bimetallic standard. This debate will rage, and we'll talk about it more in lesson 4. But it becomes the focal point of the 1896 election. And in 1900, the Republicans win in 1896. They also win in 1900, and they pass the Gold Standard Act, which sets gold as the only metal to back paper dollars. But we'll talk more about the debates in class and in lesson 4. You just need to know that Republicans want the high tariff, Democrats want the low tariff, Republicans want gold only, and Democrats want gold and silver. And that's all I have for you today. Write down any questions you have, fill out your learning targets, and I will see you back in class tomorrow. Bye-bye.